Before we get into the writing tasks, there is one really, really important thing I want to highlight. And it ties a little bit into, as I'm sure you're aware, a societal pressure. And it's this misconception that no one studies for the GAT, no one prepares for the GAT isn't important. So, you can see it everywhere. You can see it from, a couple days ago, even on the 6th, so on the 1st of this month, where someone said, "Are you kidding? No one prepares for the GAT." On forums, they say you can't really study for it. It's a general achievement test. And even on the official manual, they say no special study is required for the GAT. For those of you trying to get into medicine, and I'm sure there are a few of you, you'll notice that this is the exact line of explanation they use to describe something like the UCAT, where technically, yes, no special study is required for a UCAT, but it turns out that your score typically is usually perfectly correlated to the amount of time you spend working on the UCAT. Similarly, the GAT, people are going to say in your schools, "Oh, don't study for it." As in, like, peers around you are going to say, "No one cares about the GAT. It's useless," et cetera, et cetera. The key thing is the people who do well on the GAT are the people who may, in public, they might say, "Oh yeah, the GAT doesn't matter." But in private are actually doing a couple GAT papers, are actually preparing for the GAT behind the scenes and end up acing the GAT, doing extremely well, even though there was this misconception that they weren't even meant to study for it. So keep that in mind. The fact that you guys are here in this session already gives you that inherent advantage, that inherent desire to want to do really well. And so let's really hammer that in. So from personal experience, how did I go in the GAT? It's I guess a piece of evidence that shows how important preparation really is, because in year 11 the GAT, there's a misconception that I was drawn into that did not matter. And so I did do quite well in it. Like, there's no doubt that those are good scores, but I think the key thing here is, in terms of the raw scores before prep and raw scores after prep, I went from a 38 in written communications to a 50 in written communications, a 39 in maths and sciences to a 46 in maths and sciences. And then, arts and humanities, reading comprehension, I obviously did quite excellent in year 11 as well, but there was still that improvement from before prep to after prep where I was able to get a 50. There's no section that was not improved drastically by me just doing, I believe it was 3 or 4 practice papers. Something that probably takes a good, let's say, maybe 8 or 9 hours of total, 2 hours a day, 4 days. And it makes such a big difference. And it really gives you that confidence going into the assessments, knowing you have this as a backup at least. The standardized scores that are scale out of 50, like a normal subject, they do tell, a lot of the story in terms of improvement. But if I want to focus on the written communication in 2019, that showed a raw score of 27. Now, if you take a raw score out of 27, it's out of 40. So that's a score that's probably a 6 or 7 out of 10. And then if you go to a 38 out of 40, which is my year 12 score, after I figured out what you were meant to do, that is probably a 9.5 out of 10. So the drastic improvements that come from understanding what to do are really what we're going to try and target in this session. And hopefully this slide and this introduction gives you an idea into how incredibly important it is to put an effort into things, even though people around you are telling you not to put an effort into them, simply to see results like this.